Okay, today we're going to start on Daf Yud Aleph, and we already began the Gemara yesterday. We'll start from Mar Berei de Ravina. Mar Berei de Ravina Amar. It's about 13 lines from the top, 12 lines from the top. It's 11a. And we thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. In the course of our learning, we should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. So the Gemara started off over here with, where do the sages know that we follow the majority? The Gemara was a little surprised. It says, where do we know? It says in the pasuk that you follow the majority. It says, yeah, that I know. But that's a different majority. That's a majority that I have in front of you. For example, you have 9 stores and 10 stores, 9 are kosher. So that's the majority you're going to follow. Or if you have a Sanhedrin and you have 51%, let's say this way, and 49% that say that way, that's a majority that you have in front. You can actually count that majority. Question is, what about a majority, Ruba de Lesikaman, a statistic majority, where the people aren't in front of you, they're just, the numbers in the world are like that. So, for example, Katan and Katana, can they do Yivam? Are they going to be able to have children, or maybe they're going to grow up being sterile? Well, Rabbi Lazar says, that was our first answer. Rabbi Lazar says that we're going to learn from an Ayla. It says that someone can bring an Ayla. Maybe when he brings the animal, the Ayla, there's a hole in the meninges, in the brain, and there's no way of checking it. So how can he bring it? Maybe it's a treifa. So we say that we rely on the majority. See, we rely on the majority. The Gemara says, no, maybe you have to burn a hole through it. Doesn't say burn over here. No, here it says maybe you cut through the head. You cut into the skull to be able to check it. Cut a hole to be able to check it. Okay, and it's still considered that you didn't cut it into another piece because it's still attached on the base. Lower down, it's still attached. So we don't have a source yet. Well, Mar Berei de Ravina, that's what we're holding. Mar Berei de Ravina, Mar Asim Mishvir Setzim B'Pesach. We can learn it from the law that you're not allowed to break a bone in the Korban Pesach. It says you have to eat the Korban Pesach one night, and it says you can't break any bones. Amar Rachmana, the Eberster says, that you don't break a bone. But 1 second, you can't break a bone. What are you going to do about the skull? Maybe there's the meninges, krum shel mayach, the membrane in the brain, has a hole in it, and therefore it would be a treifa. So how are you supposed to find that out if you can't break the bone? It must be that we follow a majority. Follow the majority. Most animals are fine. Most meninges don't have holes in it. So let's assume that it's going to be fine. We follow a statistical majority. Mimai, how do you know that? Maybe you're right, you can't break a bone. Maybe you can burn a hole through the bone. How do you do that? You put a coal on the skull, and then you leave it there till it burns a hole through the skull, and then you can check it. There's the Tanya, because we have a brisa that says, if someone doesn't cut the bone, he doesn't break the bone, but he breaks the sinews. Or someone that burns a bone. There's no prohibition of breaking the bone over there. You see, that burning a hole through the bone is not a problem. So we don't have a source, because maybe the laws would be much more complex and much more difficult, but maybe that's the halacha. We'll learn it from the tail of the animal. Rachmana, the Eibishter says, if someone would bring a shlamim or a chatas, either from a sheep or a ram, so they have a fat tail. It says chel b'ya'alya, the fat tail, tmima, complete. That means they have to bring it complete, that they don't cut it up. Maybe inside the alya is the spine, in the tail. The The spine goes all the way down, all the way to the tail. Now, if the spinal cord is broken, then the animal becomes a treifa. However, that depends where on the spinal cord. If it's anywhere before the thighs, then it's a treifa. If it's after the thighs, if it's already after, if it's like more towards the tail, then it's not going to affect the animal. If the spinal cord all the way down at the tail is broken. So the Gemara is asking over here that since we know what part of the aliyah, where does the tail begin? The tail, this fat tail goes all the way back to the place of the kidneys, which is above the thighs, where the thighs separate from the body. Well, if it's going all the way back there, then maybe the spinal cord in there was actually broken beforehand, and it's really a treifa. Maybe it's broken. It says that it's you follow the majority. The Gemara says maybe maybe that's not the spot where you cut the tail off. Maybe you cut the tail from even lower. No, it says opposite the atza. What's the atza? Makim shakleis yaitzeis, which is where the kidneys are. Which means it's from higher up, which actually would make it a treifa if it would have been severed over there. The Gemara says, Mimai, how do you know that this is relying on Rayiv? We say, so why is it kosher if you can't check it? Dilma the pasachla badakla. Maybe you actually have to cut every tail open and you have to check. V'mishum tmima, it says in the pasuk that it has to be complete. It can't be cut. That's only if you cut off a piece. But if it's still attached, in other words, they make a little incision and you flip it open, you could see the spine. So then that's not a problem of tamima. It's still complete, and just has like a little flap that you can open. If that's the case, then maybe it's not because we're relying on the majority. The majority is kosher. Maybe you have to check each one. Sheshes prayed Rav Yidiyam. Rav Sheshes says, see, what we did so far was we did Zman, Shavach, Machnash. So that's the siman. We did so far Rabbi Lazar, Mar Braid Ravina, and the last one that we did was Rav Nachman Yitzchak, which is Zman. Lazar, Mar Braid Ravina, and Rav Nachman. Now we're holding by Rav Sheshes, which is has the acronym Shavach. Shin Beis Chaf. So the first one is a Shin. Rav Sheshes, Braid Rav Yidiyam, Mar Asya, the Egla Rufa. We're going to learn from the Egla Rufa. Egla Rufa is when a person is found dead in between two cities. They have to take a calf down to the valley and to break the neck from the back. The Merachmana Ha'arufa says the broken neck, Kashi Shlema Tavi, that everything else has to be intact. Problem is, treifi. How do you know that it was a kosher animal? Maybe it was a treifi animal. Maybe inside there's a problem with the organs and different things. How are you supposed to know if it has to be intact? Rather, it must be that we're not going to check it. We're going to just rely on the majority. We see that you can rely on a statistical majority, which is our original question. We're going to learn it from the Egla Rufa. Where it says, maybe you're going to ask, so what's the difference? Who cares if it's a treifa or not? It says, no, it does make a difference. It says this is atonement. It has the laws of a carbon. And so just like the laws of a carbon, one of them is that it's asr ba'ana. So to over here, it's going to be asr ba'ana, but the main point is that it's like a carbon, which means that it can't be a treifa. Okay, that was Rav Sheshes Breder Rav Yidi. Now, you take the bays of Rabbah. It's probably because his name was Rabbi Ba. Rabbah bar Rav Shila Amar. Rabbah bar Shila. Rabbah bar Rav Shila says, Amar, he says, Asyami paraduma. We're going to learn from the paraduma. Dam Rachman of Shachar Rasaraf. Paraduma, the red heifer. It says that they would shecht it and they would burn it. They they would actually burn it whole, which means that they're not going to check it if there's any trephus, if it's missing anything, or if anything is messed up. Gemara says, "V'leicher still matrefi." But how can you do that? Maybe it's a trefa. Allah misham darmin until basaruba. Rather, it's because we're going to follow the majority. We're not going to check it at all. We're going to follow a majority. We see that you can just rely on the majority. Interesting Taisvus that I'm seeing. Taisvus says that there's a problem with this question on this Gemara because the paraduma is 2 years old. If it survived the first 2 years, then it has a chazaka that it's not a treifa because it wouldn't have been able to survive if it was a treifa. So we had a Gemara before that says, how do you know that you follow a chazaka? Okay. Now we have our Gemara that says, how do you know that you follow Roiv? So one of our proofs is, according to Rabba Barshila, you learn from the Paraduma. Tais is asking that maybe the Paraduma goes back to the other Gemara, that we rely on a Chazaka, but maybe we're not relying on the Roiv. Tais says that we don't say Chazaka if we never had an absolute knowledge of this chazaka. This was only a chazaka that we have because of the culmination of how long it lived. We never had a single moment where we knew where it was checked to see if it's not a treifa. Taisha says the kol chazaka shleinis barara leinoida filoshachas leoslin basra. Based on this, Taisha says that if someone makes cheese from a bunch of animals, then he shechs one of them, cheese from in the milk from a bunch of animals. It's like a dairy farm. Then one of the animals gets shechted. He finds that one of those animals is a treifa. So he says everything is aser because I don't have a chazaka before in those animals that they weren't a treifa. Or in that animal, that wasn't a treifa. Never had a chazaka that it's not a treifa. It's just going along. See, if I would have had a chazaka before that it's not a treifa, then I would say that, okay, so it became a treifa right now at the end, after I already milked it after. I don't have that chazaka before that it was never a treifa. I never had chazaka shenis barara. However, he does say that if there's a treifa in the lungs because of a sircha is an adhesion between the lobes of the lungs. There's 5 lobes in the lungs, and if there's an adhesion there, so he says that we don't know how to check it. If we would know how to check it, then we would say maybe it's mutter. We don't know how to check it, so we say it's a treifa. He says if that's the problem, then we don't have to say that this cheese is going to be aser, because it's a svek sveka. Maybe it's not a suffix. Maybe it's not a treifa. That means maybe it came later, and even if not, maybe it's not a treifa because maybe if we would check it, we'd be able to see that there was actually no hole under the adhesion. And even if you'd say that there was a treifa, but maybe it became treifa later. Okay, anyway, that's Taisvus asking a question on the case of the paraduma because of its age. Well, the Gemara says that the same way you shecht it has to be complete. Also, when you burn, it has to be complete. But maybe the paraduma was a treifa. Like you just throw it into the fire, put it on top of the fire. But maybe there's a treifa. Allah misham darmin until basaruba must be. We're not worried about if it's a treifa because we'll follow the majority. If you're going to say, well, who cares if it's a treifa? You're just burning it. Says no, it makes a big difference because chatas kai rachmana. We call it a chatas. The Eibishter calls it a chatas, which means it has all the halachas of a karban. The halachas of a karban, then it can't be a treifa, or else it's not going to be kosher. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar, and this is the shvach because his name is Acha Ches. So we had a Sheishes, Rabbah, and Rav Acha, and so that's what we're holding. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar, he says Asi Misar Mishtaleach. We'll learn it from the goat in Yom Kippur. There were two goats. They did a lottery. One of them was brought as a karban, and one of them was pushed off the cliff to Azazel. Rachmana Amar, the Eibishter says, "V'lakach Shnei Asirim." Take the two goats. Your name Shavim. They both should be equal. Okay. The problem is maybe one of them is a treifa. Now, the one that's a karban, so that we'll deal with as a karban, we're going to shecht it. Maybe we'll check it to see. However, the one that you push off the cliff, how do you know if it's not a treifa? You're pushing it off a cliff. It must be that you have to follow the majority. The reason why we say it's not a treifa is because we're following a majority. The majority tells us that most animals aren't a treifa. If you're going to say that who cares, it's just being pushed off a cliff. Who cares if it's a treifa? It says, the only way that the lottery is going to work is if both would be able to be acceptable as a karban. The only thing that could go into this lottery is if both of them would be able to be brought as a karban. If one's a treifa, then you can't put it in the lottery. So, and we can't check it because you push it off a cliff. Maybe you have to go to the bottom of the cliff and you have to find the pieces of find the animal and start checking it, see if it's a treifa. Otherwise, we'll have to do it again. But it says that it didn't even reach halfway down the mountain until it was already dismembered, until it was disorganed. It was it came into different pieces. The whole animal was pieces everywhere. So if that's the case, so then we're gonna have to rely on the raiv, on the majority that tells us that it's not a treifa, and that's how we'll be able to. This is our source that we rely on the raiv, on the statistical majority. Rav Mari says, "Asya mi maka aviv v'imay." The way we'll do this is we'll be able to our source for relying on a majority is because we have a rule that if someone bruises, he injures, lets blood from his father or his mother, so dam rachmana katle. The Eibishter says that he gets put to death. How do you know that his father is really his father? Maybe someone else lived with his mother. You don't know. Rather, what we're going to do is we're going to say we'll follow the majority, and the husband is going to be the parent, the father. Why? Because the majority of relations that the wife would have would be with the husband, even if there was one time or occurrences where she lived with someone else, that wouldn't be the majority. So we'll follow the majority. We'll say that the child is from the father, from the husband, and that's why we're going to put him to death for what he did. Otherwise, how could we put him to death? He'll say it's not really my father. How do you know that the reason how we know it's his father is because we're following a majority? The majority would be the father. Maybe the mother and the father were both in captivity in prison, and there was no one else there. And this is the case. When will we put the child to death for injuring his parents? Is only in a case where the father and the mother were the only people in that room who was taking care of the prison. Must have been women. Afilu hachi, the Gemara says, "Ein apetropos la'arayas." There's no such thing. Ein apetropos la'arayas. It's interesting. The Gemara doesn't suggest that maybe it was women that were taking. In a Petrovus Larayas would tell me that the guards themselves of the prison, maybe they're the parent of this child, and the Gemara is not even thinking that maybe the prison guards are women. I was thinking that there has to be prison guards, and but the prison guards would be men. It has to be. It's impossible to be women. That's what the Gemara is thinking. So then, if that's the case, then you say, well, they were being guarded. It says, yeah, but you can't even trust the guards. Enough Petropus Larais. You can't trust anyone there. Okay. Rav Kana Amar, this last set of answers as an acronym of Meknesh. Oh, it sounds like the Moroccan city, Meknesh. Mem, Chaf, Nun, and Shin. So the Mem we just did was Rav Mari. The Chaf is now Rav Kana. The Nun is going to be Ravina. And then the Shin is going to be Rav Ashi. So here we're up to Rav Kana. Rav Kana Amar Asya Mihoirigas Nevesh. We're going to learn from someone that commits murder. We're going to learn from there that we're going to follow a majority. It says, how does that? The Eibishter says, a murderer gets put to death. Maybe the person that he murdered was a treifa. He was going to die anyway. So he killed a dead person. So you don't get put to death if we know that he was a treifa. Must be that we're following a majority that this person that he killed was probably not a treifa. Maybe we're going to have to open up the victim, the murdered person. We're going to have to open him up. We're going to have to do an autopsy, and we'll check the entire body to see if he's a treifa. It says minval, but you can't do that to a human. It's a disgrace to the corpse. Says, yeah, but so what's better, to kill the person just because we don't want to disturb the corpse? No, we should. We don't want to kill this person for nothing. If the murdered one was really a treifa, so the murderer wouldn't be considered a murderer anymore. So we should open up the body and do an autopsy and see if there was a treifa. Autopsy is to check how he died. This would be to check if he was going to die anyway. Says it's impossible to find out because it could be exactly at the sword mark, right at the place where the sword went through, because this is the murderer. He killed him with the sword. So maybe on that spot there was already a hole in his pipes or whatever, and it was actually a treifa, and we can't tell because the sword went right through the hole. So it went through that spot. So now we're going to say, well, that's not the spot that it was a treifa. He says, no, the sword, you can't check it anymore. Okay. So it has to be that we're relying on a majority that it's not a treifa. Ravina Marasim Edim Zaymimin. Ravina says we can learn it from Edim Zaymimin. Edim Zaymimin are witnesses that are told, we testify that someone committed a crime. And then we tell them that how could you have testified, how could you have witnessed this? You weren't even in that location. Well, it goes like this. You have to do to the witnesses, conspiring witnesses, just like they wanted to do. What it means, if they wanted to cause someone to be killed by testifying that he murdered someone else. So we're going to do that to them. They're going to get killed. Where it says, maybe the person that they're testifying about, that he'd committed a murder, maybe that person is a treifa. And we're not going to cut him up. He's still alive. And but maybe he's a treifa. And they wanted to do, what did they want to do? They wanted to cause a treifa to die. Well, that's not, we can't do that to them, because what they wanted to do was not the same that we're going to do to them. The person that they wanted to put to death was a treifa. Allah mishum dam amrin zil basaru, but we're going to say that no, the person that they were testifying about that he's a murderer was not a treifa. The majority tells us he's not a murderer. Statistics tell us he's not a treifa. Maybe the person was already put to death, and because he testified, and now we're going to go check him. And if he and if it turns out that everything about him is intact, is perfect, then we're going to say that okay, so they wanted to kill a treifa, then we're going to kill them. Says that's impossible. But Tanya Berebi Omer, Berebi, the great person, said that loy hargu ne'aragin. If we already carried out the psak based on Eidim Zayman, I'm sorry, if we did not carry out the psak based on the testimony of Eidim Zayman, then, in other words, we didn't kill anyone by because of the testimony of Eidim Zayman, then we're going to do to the Eidim Zayman what they wanted to do. But hargu, but if the Bezdin already killed the person based on the testimony of Eidim Zayman, ain't eragin, then you don't go back to the Eidim Zayman and kill them. It's a little counterintuitive. But that's the way the halacha works. That the Eidim Zayman only get put to death if the verdict, based on their judgment, was never carried out yet. If we didn't put that person to death, then they would get killed. If that's the case, and there's no way of checking the person's alive, how are we supposed to check to see if he was a treifa or not? It must be we rely on a majority that he's not a treifa. And therefore, we're going to put these Eidim Zayman to death based on their conspiring testimony. Ravashi says, "Asim Shchita Atzma." We're going to learn from Shchita itself. Abishta says that you should do Shchita and eat. Maybe at the exact spot where you're doing the Shchita, there was already a hole there, and you can't see it. Because it's only after and you can't stop even to look as you're cutting. Like the surgeons would do. They cut very slowly. So, but you can't do that because you can't. The shechita is you cut. There's no pauses in the shechita. So you can't take the knife out and check and then put it back in. It must be that we follow the majority. Amar Ravashi. Ravashi says, Amish Lishmaita Kamida Rav Kana. It said over this teaching in front of Rav Kana. Ramila Rav Kana Kamida Rav Simeon. Some say Rav Kana said it over in front of Rav Simeon. Amar Lei, Rav Kana responded, he says, Dilma, Echad de Efsher, Echad lo Efsher. How do you know you really rely on a majority? Maybe we do everything that we can not to rely on the majority. So, for example, there's 18, we're going to learn later, there's 18 potential trephas in an animal. A hole in the meninges, something in the lungs, missing this organ or that organ. There's 18 possibilities. We check, as we're going to see in Rashi on the next page, we check just for the lungs and that's it. We don't go through. We don't open up the skull to check the meninges and all like that. But there's 18. So maybe the halacha is Rav Kana saying, maybe that you actually can't rely on the majority and you have to actually check all 18. And maybe also the child that wants the yibam, we don't know if he's going to grow up being sterile or if he's going to be able to father children, which would mean that he's eligible for yibam. We don't know that. Maybe we actually have to wait, because anytime that you're able to check, you have to check. You're not able to check, okay, fine. So you can't check. So it's impossible to check. So we'll have to rely on the majority. But every other possible case where you're able to check, maybe you can't rely on a majority, and you have to go through all of this. This would make a big difference in the shlachtas if they have to cut open every skull and check the meninges, or for the case of yibam. Rav Kana's challenge to this. It says, Dilei Temahachi, you're not going to say this the way that Rav Kana is suggesting. That maybe you have to check every single possibility, whatever you're able to do. And you can't just say, well, you don't have to check because we rely on a majority. What do you want to say about Rav Meir? Rav Meir says that he suspects the minority. Rameir is the one that said that when it comes to Yibam, you have to wait for the child to grow up. He can't do it when he's younger. We don't know if he's going to grow up being sterile. He doesn't rely on a majority. So 1 second. According to Rameir, he's never going to be allowed to eat meat. Because what do we do when it comes to the meat? We don't do all the checkings. We rely on the majority. So it must be, the Rameir holds, that we only rely on a majority for things that are impossible to check. Which means, according to Rameir would eat meat, but he'd have to check all the possible things that there are to check. In other words, by the shechita itself, I can't tell if there was a hole already in the trachea before I started to cut, or in the esophagus. I can't tell that, because that's an impossible thing. So I can't check that. But every other treifa, according to Rabbi, you have to check for to open up the whole animal. The price of meat, of kosher meats, would go up like crazy because of the manpower it's going to take to do all those bedikas. You have to have like 18 mashgichim over there. By us, we have a mashgiach. He puts his hand inside the cavity of the animal, and he feels around. It's called bedikas pnim. Right after the shechita, they make a slice. And he puts his hand through in the animal to feel if there's anything he could feel on his fingers, if there's any adhesions. Over here, we would have to have 18 people doing all different parts of the body, checking for different treifas.
Does anybody? We have this concept. I think it's Tanya or somewhere, like if which is the avir purifies one.
Machkim.
What?
Machkim.
Yeah.
Makes much.
So, does anyone ever being like that would even apply to animals? In other words, if the animal's lung is okay, that means it only took in good in its body. Therefore, there wouldn't be. You have a havamina that there wouldn't be any treif in it. I'm just saying that's why we picked the lung as opposed to, because it said Hashem is b'chen klayas for labor. Why don't we just check the kidneys or something else?
They want to claim like this, that glatt kosher is a heter of the Ramah said that you can check certain types of sirchas, and he relies on that the checking to remove certain adhesions in the lung. Maseches does not rely on that heter. He says if there's any adhesions, it's straight. Now that's why the Sfardim they're careful. Only Bet Yosef. They only eat Bet Yosef. Okay. Well, they want to say like this. They want to say that the Ramah, this from Rabbi Weberman, Allah Shalom, that the reason why the Ramah was lenient is because he lived in Krakow, which is in Poland. In Poland, the animals all had colds, they all had pneumonia and all types of things, and the lungs were all messed up. So you'd open up an animal over there. There was no way to have an animal without sircha. The Beis Yosef lived in either Turkey or in Eretz Yisrael, where the animals, the weather's warm. The animals had healthy lungs. He says we have to rely on a heter for. You have to rely on a heter. All the animals are good. If it's the animal with the sircha, it's a problem. Don't rely on that. So anyway, you wanted to say it has to do with the avir of Eretz Yisrael. Okay.
Well,
so the Gemara says, Rameir wouldn't eat meat. Maybe if you want to say that, okay, Rameir doesn't eat meat. Now, what are we saying then when saying Rameir doesn't eat? Rameir doesn't follow the majority. The only way that Rameir could eat meat is if we'll say that it's the places that are impossible to check. Rameir holds you don't have to check, but everything else you do have to check. Let's say that's what we'll say as well. So v'chite machinami will say maybe Rameir actually holds that since you can't check the shechita, place of the shechita maybe had a hole. So maybe Rameir would never eat meat. Says the problem is Pesach v'kachim ha'yiklamim. What's he going to do about karbanos and about the carbon Pesach? It's going to be impossible. Obviously, Ella heicha de efsher efsher heicha de efsher efsher. Rameir himself is going to have to rely on this. He's going to have to say that. Usually we don't follow a majority. However, places that it's impossible, we'll have to follow the majority. Now, if that's the case, then when it comes to the 18 treifas, Rameir would have to check for all of them. The only thing that he wouldn't check for is for the one that's a hole right by the shechita itself that's impossible to check. And when it comes
hole in the hole,
the hole in the hole, right? The the child that's doing ibam, since you're able to wait, you can wait 13 years or 18 years, however it takes to find out, see if he's sterile. So that we'll have to wait because Rameo will wait. Now, the Gemara now concludes. It says, "Hachinami hechad efsher efsher echad le'efsher le'efsher." Maybe for us also, we don't follow majority entirely. Maybe we will follow majority only when it's impossible. But maybe really we should be checking all 18. So the Gemara, so Rashi over here finishes off the Gemara. It's interesting. Like the Gemara just leaves it at that. But if you look at Rashi on the top line, top of the skinny lines, he says, "L'didon nami hechi alfin. How could we learn? Lavade alach l'meshem misinai." The Gemara doesn't conclude. The Gemara leaves it off like vague. Rather, we're going to have to say that it's alach l'meshem misinai, that we rely on the majority. Even if it's possible to check. So Rashi gives another possibility. We have a pasuk that says that you follow a majority. The only thing is that we said that pasuk is referring to a majority that you have in front of us, not a statistical majority. Rashi says maybe the pasuk is actually talking about a statistical majority. So in other words, two pshatim. Why do we follow majority in Torah? And one is it's halach l'mishim Sinai. The other one is that the pasuk says you follow majority, and that majority is talking about also a statistical majority. So he says that based on this, Hamil says samchinan v'lebat kinan kol yudches treifas. You see that Rashi? He says based on this, we don't check all 18 treifas. Which one do we check? The kuvas areya, talking about a hole in the lungs. And that's because it's common. What happens if we can't check it? If we weren't able to check it, then it's still kosher. For some reason, the lung disappeared. The samchinan aha. But we don't let anyone know about this halacha. Why? They'll make the lung go missing, every animal, and they'll.
Besides the smoothing of the hand to make sure it's clogged, don't they have the thing where they
blow it up?
Yeah. Is that to make sure no air goes out?
Yeah, but I think they only have to blow it if they had a shiloh, then they blow it. I don't know if they have to blow up every lung.
But they wouldn't feel a hole. They'll feel a roll. They'll feel a protrusion, but you don't feel the tiny.
No, you won't feel the hole. What we're concerned about is that maybe there was adhesion to the lung that came because of a hole.
Also,
yeah. Adhesion, they think, would be the moisture that's coming because of a hole in the lung. Now that moisture is turning into
adhesions. No, I mean after anyone's abdominal surgery, there's typically adhesions.
Right. Those growths are when they're part of the healing.
Band-aids.
Right. But we think that that's because it had a hole, and if it had a hole, then it's a treifa, and then such. Okay. A new Gemara. I'm Rav Nachman, I'm a Rav. Rav Nachman says in the name of Rav. Usually it's Rav Nachman, I'm a Shmuel. It's Rav Nachman, I'm a Rav. Ra echad. Shachat. If you see someone shechting, Imro mitchil avad saif. If you saw the whole thing from beginning to end, on the charts Rav Nachman is on the Shmuel, probably, no?
Yeah.
Right. Nachman and his father they're both students of Shmuel.
He also learned from Rav.
It has over there a line that he learned from Rav.
Yeah.
Okay.
Diagonal, but he was, according to this, he was in Naradai, so the yeshiva of Shmuel.
Right.
So he learned from both.
Right.
And he was the guy who was married to Yalta.
Yeah.
Famous Yalta.
Yalta's coming up.
Yalta.
So, Rav Nachman says in the name of Rav, if you see someone shechting, if you saw the entire shechita, then mutalechel mishchitasa, then you can eat it. Im lav, if you weren't there the whole time, masalechel mishchitasa, then you can't eat it. Mar says, hey chidami, what's going on over here? Either the other the gomer, if you know that he learned the halachas, so lamali ra, why do you have to watch him? Either the other gomer, if you know that he doesn't know the halachas, pshita, then of course you can't eat it. He doesn't know the halachas. Ela d'layadi gomer ilaygomer. Rather, we don't know. We don't know anything about this guy. So the Gemara says, so we have to, if that's the case, then we have to watch him.
So is he worse than the Kuti? Not as bad.
The Gemara says, that's why don't we rely on the rule that the majority, you just told me rely on a majority. Most people that go to Shecht are probably know what they're doing, right? Most people that are in the pilot seat in the plane are probably pilots. Most people that have wearing the surgeon thing are probably know what they're doing. It's a safe assumption. Even though you go to a surgeon, you don't say, "Show me your diploma." So that's if he's wearing that jacket, then he probably knows what he's doing. The same thing, the guy with the knife and the shlachta, he probably knows what he's doing. We could rely on that. If someone finds a tanagos that's already shechted, or if he tells the shliach to go shecht for me, the shliach goes and he finds that it was shechted already. Obviously, someone shechted it, and it's probably kosher. You find the shechted, it's probably kosher. You can assume that it's kosher. So what's going on over here? We see someone shechting, and if you didn't see it the whole time, then you just assume that he's kosher. It says, it says, you're right. Here, the reason our problem is, we know that he doesn't know the halachas. Really, we would rely that he's probably an expert. But here we know that he doesn't know the halachas. However, the shachet kaman chad siman shaper. We saw him shecht one, and he did the first siman. He did it quite well. So, since the first siman he did, it seems like he knows what he's doing. So we can already leave in middle. Kamash Malan. So it comes to tell us, that was, he got lucky. If he doesn't know the halachas, the fact that he shechted well, that was just by chance. He just got lucky. Idach. But the next siman, maybe he pressed down while he was shechting. Maybe he paused in the middle. Right? We don't know what happened.
How can you use as an excuse that you would have left after the first semen when the correct shechita is semen? If there's a pause, then how can you leave?
He got a call on his cell phone.
Who? The guy who's watching? Yeah.
Rav Nachman, Rav Dimi Bar Yosef asked Rav Nachman a question. If someone tells a shliach to shecht, and the shliach goes, and he finds that it's shechted already, what's the din? Amar Lai, Chaskasi Shachet. Says, well, the halach is, we learned already before, we mentioned that it's a chazaka that it was shechted properly. Let's say you tell your shliach, go take truma for me. He goes over there and he finds that the truma was already separated. It was a truma basket, and you see that it's already taken. It's already. You say that it's not a good truma. Where it says, 1 second, Manavshach, what's going on over here? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say it right. What's going on here is the shliach didn't come back and give you the pshat is like this. The shliach didn't come back and tell you that he did it or he didn't do it. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So the balabayas goes and he sees that it's shechted. The balabayas goes and he sees truma was taken. And he sees the truma is taken. So by the shechita we say that it's good. By the truma we say it's not good because he didn't tell us. Manavshach. If we say the shliach is shlichusay fil trumanami, then why don't we say the truma is good? The chazaka that the shliach does what he's supposed to. That should be good enough. The en chazaka shliach itzlichus. I feel the shchita namile. Am I relying on the shchita if we can't rely on the shliach? Amalei tells him who's asking. This is Rav Dimi by Yosef asking Rav Nachman. Chiseichel ala kur de milcha. It says, I'll tell you the answer when you measure for me a core of salt. It says it's a joke.
It's like a ton.
Right. It says, it sounds like he was kidding with him. It says, I'm going to give you an answer, but I want a hefty price for it. The answer is like this. Lailam, this is where the salt comes from, salary. So that was the expense of it. Lailam, ein chazaka, salary comes from salt. Salt is from salary. Lailam, ein chazaka shliach es yishlichus. So the truth is, we don't rely on that a shliach did it. Shchita, the reason why shchita, why it's kosher, is inami, dilma, ina shachrina, shama v'azal shachar, reimutzim in shchita mumchimin. It's possible that the shliach didn't actually do the shchita. Someone else did the shchita. Maybe the other person that did it didn't know what he's doing. He says, no. Majority of people that do shchita know what they're doing. Truma, when it comes to taking truma, maybe someone else heard him saying to the shliach that I need you to go take truma, and the other person went and did truma. Now, there's a problem with truma that you can't take someone's truma for him unless you have explicit intention, unless he gives you explicit permission to do that. So by the shchita, we would say that it doesn't matter even if the shliach didn't do it, someone else did it, it's still going to be kosher. But by truma, if someone else would do it, it's not going to be kosher. So therefore, he can't eat it unless he takes truma again. Okay, we're up to lema on 12a. Yud Beis Simon Aleph. Have a good day.